Hey everybody, Professor Snart checking in as we move through our open genre workshop. I'm just going to look through our course here. So it's Friday morning as I'm recording this. It's beautiful weather outside, which I feel like I should just mention because in looking back or thinking back to some of my earlier videos, the weather seemed to figure kind of prominently. It was often the first thing I noticed about how crappy it was. So it's beautiful today, so I thought I would throw that in there. I'm also Canadian, and we tend to fixate on the weather. I think it's like a long history of farming. I don't know. Anyway, we have just finished up then the posting due date for our final open genre workshop, Unit 11, which was Thursday, which is yesterday as far as when I'm recording this. So now we have, again, a fairly long time for the turnaround feedback. Probably longer than we need, but when I develop the course or do the schedule, it's really based on a full class and potentially much larger groups, and so more work for you to deal with. So if it feels like there's sort of like too much time or this very big gap between what we're doing, it's partly just a matter of the coincidental nature of the number of students we now have who are posting work relative to how many we could have if the class were still full and everyone was active. So you may feel like there's almost too much time, but that's sort of why. So after that final workshop wraps up and the feedback date is Thursday, April 23rd, so next Thursday, we have a week that's devoted to virtual conferences. So you can get in there. I'm encouraging you to sign up early so you get a date or a time that works for you. I'll try to accommodate people who sort of don't fit the schedule, but again, if you're just checking on day 3 of the 4 days of the conference and saying, well, it's all taken, you sort of have to make the effort to get in there early and see what's available, rather than waiting till the last minute or after the last minute even. And that virtual conference is a nice kind of final opportunity for us to, well, and it doesn't have to be virtual, so we can meet face-to-face, but it's a nice final opportunity to talk about sort of the progress of your writing throughout the term, genres that you felt comfortable in, others that you struggle with, questions that you've got, if you wanted to review particular pieces of writing and get more feedback, or if you had specific questions. Again, it's sort of a mandatory time within our course where you and I will connect, but there's no set mandatory kind of objectives or things that we have to cover. It's really just your time to use in a way that you think would be most beneficial for you. And then we get into our final unit, kind of that reflection, like what did I learn in this class? And then that's pretty much it. So we are getting towards the end of our course. So what you might notice in the grading then, and remember this is just half the grade at this point, so if you post it on time in a file format that we could all get, then you got half of the workshop credit, which is 50 out of 100 points. But I also provided a little more elaborate commentary on the works that people were posting relative to what I've done consistently from the beginning. And there's a number of different reasons for that. One of the most, I guess, practical is that I feel like, and you may feel like they're more negative than positive, but that's kind of my job. I hate to say it. I try to celebrate the strengths that are happening in the work, but it's really more useful for you as a writer moving forward if I'm pointing to things that really do need your attention. So unfortunately, it's not a balanced mix of these things, 5 things are great and these 5 things need work. I try to sort of, not intentionally, but again, because I think it's most beneficial for you as the writer, to provide you with more of that, this is the stuff that either doesn't make sense or needs further thinking about or further sort of attention from you as a writer. So it's going to feel a little imbalanced, but it's not because there weren't necessarily good things going on. It's just that I invest my time in focusing on those things that you need to be changing or might want to be changing if you move forward with revision. But if I do that in the very first workshop, it just doesn't have the same effect. I mean, ideally, it sort of motivates you as a improving writer, emerging writer, a writer who's gaining confidence to actually make those changes, either in that specific piece or just sort of generally in your writing. Sometimes you don't want to return to a thing that you've written for workshop to revise. You'd rather invest the time in doing new work. Hopefully you want to do both things, but sometimes we just can't. if I feel like if I provided that kind of sort of critical feedback at the very start, it would be really off-putting. And I know that, well, I'm sort of guessing from the student side for you guys, but I also know that from experience of my own, where professors were not always so sort of sensitive to where we were at in a course, and we're not really just meeting each other. We're still online, so it's not like we've had a lot of class time together, but we kind of have a relationship where you feel comfortable in the course. You sort of know how things work. So it makes more sense to me as we get towards the end here, our final workshop, to be a little more intrusive with my commentary. The other thing that's maybe a little less obvious or less practical is that if I start doing that right at the start, remember our whole course is based on the workshop model. So what really matters, honestly, is not the feedback you get from me, but the feedback you get from your workshop group of readers, whether that's 3 people or 5 or 9 or however big the group ends up being. Some of that feedback's going to be good, some not so good, but it's really that, like, the whole big picture that's much more valuable than just one person's opinion. And so if I get really intrusive from the get-go, people are less motivated to do the workshop part because they get the sense that, okay, I'm going to get this workshop-y stuff from other students, but I'm also going to get the professor stuff, and that's really what matters because that's what I paid for and whatever, you know. So it just sets up a bad dynamic across the board. So in short, that there's reasons to why the feedback gets sort of progressively more and also more, let's say, constructive as we get towards the end. And a lot of times the feedback I provide invites your response. It asks you questions. And so by all means, if you have questions about what I've said, or I've asked you questions that you'd like to provide me with answers for, none of which affects your grade, notice. That's the nice part, I think, about how our course is set up. Even if your work is bad, let's just say it that way, if you've posted it on time and made a reasonable effort to make it sort of like a thing, a short story or poem or whatever, you get full credit, right? It's not about how good or bad or whatever your work is. It's so subjective sometimes. But certainly if you wanted to follow up from that feedback, by all means, send me an email, or it can be something that we talk about in that virtual or face-to-face conference time that we have coming up in a week and a half or so. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of our course, so be sure you're staying on top of those due dates. If you do have questions of any kind for me, by all means, be in touch, and enjoy the weather, finally.